Welcome to another episode of One Idea Away, where we're committed to living more fully, deeply, and consciously. Why? Because when we do, we're calmer, we're clearer, we're more connected, more joyful, and much more alive. On this show, we bring you stories of those that are figuring it out just like us, as well as experts who can shed light on the hows and the whys all of this stuff works. So I want to thank you all for tuning in and sharing and reviewing our show. If you haven't done so yet, please drop us a review. Also, subscribe to the podcast on our feed, whether it's on iTunes or whatever app you happen to be using. And if there's something that stands out in the show, do us a favor. If it makes you think of somebody, share it along, because this show is meant to get the conversation started, not just to drop in for a little inspiration. So with that, let's turn to this week's episode. Finally, it's finally here. And today I get to announce and tell you about Uncover, a retreat to create the life of your dreams. Uncover is a 3-day retreat being hosted by One Idea Away. I'm going to be there leading and facilitating the retreat, along with IPEC founder and best-selling author Bruce Schneider. We've secured the beautiful Asilomar Conference Grounds in California, just a 90-minute ride from the Bay Area, for January 18th through the 20th. And then we're going to be at the Garrison Institute in New York, just 50 miles north of the city, sitting atop the bluffs of the Hudson River on March 29th through the 31st. In this retreat, we're going to guide you through the Uncover process. You can actually learn more about that in the book, Uncovering the Life of Your Dreams by Bruce Schneider. And you're going to learn and experience a variety of mindfulness activities, share and connect as a community, and learn through practices and dialogue in a supportive and, yes, judgment-free zone. You see, this is about closing the gap between who you know yourself to be and how you're currently showing up in life. You see, that gap is part of the tension that any of us can feel in our hearts and minds, because you know there's something more for you to experience, to enjoy, to share, and to contribute. You may feel as if who you are is covered up by your responsibilities and circumstances and priorities, and we don't want to see anyone lose any more years of their lives not being who they fully and truly are. It's time for that to end, and over these 3 days it will. You will uncover your personal path to happiness, freedom, and aligning with your true desires. I cannot wait to meet you in person. I can't wait to spend the time with you over these 3 days. It's going to be an extraordinary experience. Just go to oneideaaway.com/retreat. That's oneideaaway.com/retreat. I promise you, you will never forget this experience. Hello there, everyone. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. You see, we're going to bring up some of the usual topics that we get into, but in a very different context from a different perspective. We talk regularly, as you hear, about mindfulness and positive psychology, compassion, acceptance, awareness, consciousness, and so much more. We touch on those topics to uplift our lives, to live more deeply and fully and hopefully more lovingly. Very often we put this in light of how we can use these wonderful tools and practices and philosophies to nudge our lives ever closer to the rich and fulfilled and meaningful experiences of life that we wish to have. Today, we're going to talk about those things, but we're going to talk about them through the lens of an immense tragedy. On December 14th, 2012, coming up on almost 6 years ago, our nation suffered a terrible event. Adam Lanza, a very troubled and ill teen, walked into Sandy Hook Elementary School and took the lives of 26 individuals, mostly children just around 6 years of age. In the middle of what was unfolding, he needed to stop. Adam Lanza needed to stop to reload his weapon. And at that moment, a 6-year-old boy named Jesse Lewis stood up in front of the shooter while yelling for his other trapped classmates to run. Jesse was murdered. Those 9 classmates escaped. There's much tragedy associated with the events of that day, as well as extraordinary acts of courage. Children who stood up with the courage that we adults only aspire to at times. There was a tragic loss of life, a tragic assault on the most vulnerable, our children, and in an elementary school nonetheless. A tragic event that did not need to occur. And while these politicized and polarized war continues to rage on as to what to do, there are bright lights shining a way forward, a path that we can take right now, a path we can bring into our homes and into our communities, from our living rooms to our classrooms. It's a path that illuminates one clear choice, and that is to choose love. And so today, my privilege is to be here and to be joined by Jesse's mom, Scarlett Lewis. She founded the Jesse Lewis Choose Love movement after her son was murdered at the Sandy Hook tragedy. Shortly after his death, Scarlett decided to be part of the solution to these issues that we are seeing in our society that also caused this tragedy. She created the movement and became an advocate for social and emotional learning that teaches children how to manage their emotions, feel connected, and have healthy relationships. She's been instrumental in changing legislation to incorporate social emotional learning into our schools. The Jessie Lewis Empowering Educators Act was introduced by Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal, and in December of 2015, Congress approved the Every Student Succeeds Act. And with that, Scarlett, I want to thank you so much for being with us on One Idea Away.
Thanks for having me, Luke.
I guess maybe one of the places that we could begin, something that I saw within your story and how some things unfolded, and so much of what even brings us here at this point with this movement, is that after the tragedy, you re-entered your home, and you re-entered your home as you were preparing for the funerals and everything that was unfolding. And I was wondering if you could maybe pick up the story at that point of what it was that you found that really, to me, is what brings us here to this conversation today.
It absolutely is. So I went back to my little farmhouse that I have in the middle of Connecticut, where I raised my two boys as a single mom, never thinking that I could go back into the home again following the murder of Jessie. But anyway, having to go back because it came down to picking out his clothes for the funeral, and I wanted to be the one to do that. So really surrounded by family and friends, I came back to the house, went through his clothes, picked out a nice warm pair of pants and sweater, because of course it was very cold in December. And then it was on my way back out that I noticed a message that Jessie had written on our kitchen chalkboard shortly before he died. He wrote 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. And those 3 words, are not something that Jessie would normally say. They're not in the vernacular of a 6-year-old. They were phonetically spelled because he was just in first grade and learning to write. But I downloaded so much information from that message immediately. I knew that if Adam Lanza, who was the former Sandy Hook school student, his mother had been a teacher at that school, he was the perpetrator of the crime, if he had been able to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. I knew I would be spending the rest of my life spreading that message. And even more so, I knew that Jessie had a spiritual awareness that he wasn't going to be around for very much longer. It was a message that family and friends took as a message of comfort. And it really has comforted us over these last 5.5 years. But I have, knowing that was my purpose on earth, and just feeling so blessed to know what my purpose on earth is, I wrote a book called, of course, Nurturing, Healing, Love. And true to what the mission really that I feel Jessie gave me, I have been spreading that message every single day, all day long, starting in schools, but then going to every audience for the last 5.5 years. And the amazing thing about that message is that we really did a lot of research on it. And it wasn't just me, it was college doctoral professors. And we found that those 3 words are in the definition of compassion across all cultures. And then when you break down the meaning of those words, it's actually a powerful and profound formula that can lead you to choosing love in any situation or circumstance in your life. It's the basis for our pre-K through 12th grade Choose Love Enrichment program. And it's really how I live my life through this formula for choosing love.
It's really extraordinary. And I guess I'm just curious, did you ever find out how Jessie came to write those words? How he would know a word like nurturing at 6 years old?
I know it's Well, I know how he came to write those words. People ask me, gee, did you walk around saying nurturing healing love? And as a single mom that had a full-time job, and I left early in the morning and he went to one daycare, he was actually bused to another daycare because it closed later. And I had such a long commute. I never said those three words. I believe that they were a spiritual awareness that he had, and he wanted to leave a message for us, and also really give me a mission for the rest of my life, and a platform to spread it. And he certainly did that.
Yeah. And I want to get into that mission, and certainly what came out of the research that you did on those specific words with some of the people that you reached out to. I guess just before we turn to that, I am also curious as to, because Jesse has an older brother, JT, and I'm curious about sort of what was going on for you then in those then coming days and weeks and months afterward, because I know that's also part of so much of what created such a profound shift of this becoming your mission as well.
It really was. And Jesse had an older brother, JT. He was 6 years older. So JT was 12 years old, and he was attending the middle school in Newtown at the time. And actually on that day, when the parents had been called to this firehouse that's at the end of a cul-de-sac, and Sandy Hook Elementary School is at the other end. That's where we were supposed to be reunited with our kids. And of course, there were so many people that were never reunited. And JT had actually been in lockdown in his school, and he texted me. Because, everybody's on text and phones. And he said, can I come and wait with you? And I said, of course, because at that time we were being told that kids were still missing, that, maybe it was proposed to me that maybe Jesse took a contingent of kids and ran into the woods and was hiding with them. And knowing Jesse, that made perfect sense to me. And I thought, well, it's going to take them a long time to find them, maybe. Yeah, when they find them, he's going to want to be with his older brother. So my parents actually live in Newtown, and they picked up JT and brought him to the firehouse where we were all waiting with big cups of coffee. And it was maybe an hour later, and this was as I was speaking to the first responders, and they were asking me questions such as, does Jesse have any identifying marks on his body? What was he wearing? Do you have a last picture? None of which sound like that this was going to be coming to a positive conclusion. I suddenly became aware that JT at 12 years old was watching every single thing I did, every word out of my mouth, every glance, every gesture, like he could almost see every thought that was going through my mind. And I knew in that moment that this was going to be the way I was modeling in that moment, the way that JT would not only handle this tragedy in his life, but would handle every tragedy going forward. And it was so helpful to me because I knew that I had to be strong. And that doesn't mean denying my emotions. It doesn't mean that I didn't feel a tremendous amount of pain. And of course, JT knows that. But it does mean that it helped me find just this tremendous strength. I was already I was almost sure that if Jesse wasn't coming back alive, that he had done something incredibly brave. I didn't know what it was, but I just had this sense, and we found out so just very soon after from the first responders, Jesse's incredibly heroic and brave last actions to save his 9 classmates. And I try to live up to that courage every single day. I know that that's the same courage that Jesse showed, that we all have within us. We all have that little 6-year-old's courage. But what I've learned in my research is that it's like a muscle. We have to be aware of it, and we have to practice it. And so I really started out very soon understanding the importance of practicing courage and then modeling, and having to do that for JT really helped myself.
Wow. Let's talk maybe a little bit about that research then, because you take these words, nurturing, healing, love, and you do some research. Dr. Chris Cook, I think it was the director of the Compassion, Creativity, and Innovation Center at Western Connecticut University. That lets you know about compassion being connected to all of these different traditions and how these words are tied into it. What does that then introduce you to in terms of the kind of the work that you are spreading now?
Well, I actually was connected to Dr. Chris Cook, and I invited him to the house. I showed him the message and I said, I know what it means to me, but is there a deeper meaning in this? And he went and did some research, and together we broke down the meaning of those 3 words and found that it comprised this powerful and profound formula for choosing love. And I said, oh my gosh, Chris, how do I get this into schools? Because I just know that that's my mission in life. And he said, well, it's called social and emotional learning, and it's been around for a while. Here's, some websites you can read up on it. And when I did, I was like a little bit shocked, but also heartened to find that there really was a solution to what is going on in our schools that then translate out into our society. Of course, all the issues that kids have in schools, they don't stop when we graduate. They actually just continue and perhaps even get worse when we're adults. And I'm talking about things that have been going on when we were in school: bullying, substance abuse, mental illness, anxiety, depression, suicide, gangs, all of these things simply getting worse. And of course, I consider what Adam did at Sandy Hook Elementary School to be maybe the ultimate form of bullying. But of course, in turn, he was terribly bullied as well. And so there are decades of research showing that kids that learn social emotional learning skills, tools, and attitudes in class, and when I say social emotional learning, I'm talking about teaching kids how to get along, how to have deep and meaningful connections, skills and tools for resilience, how to identify, label, manage, and express emotions, conflict resolution, those skills and tools. And by the way, obviously essential 21st century life skills, but we're not born with them. They have to be taught. So interesting, right? So as I did my research, I realized, wow, I don't have a lot of these skills and tools. And I have been learning them over the past 5 years. And I have to say my life is exponentially better. And so the research out there shows that when kids learn these skills and tools in classrooms, that it proactively reduces and prevents all of those negative outcomes, all of them. And so I thought, wow, this is incredible. I didn't create it. I was directed to it. And I thought, why don't we have this in every single school? If we know that teaching kids social emotional learning not only improves grades and test scores, by the way, for any of your listeners that are thinking, oh my gosh, but what about academics? It improves academics, increases attendance, increases graduation rates while decreasing anxiety, behavioral issues, bullying, as I said, and then long-term, following kids that have had social emotional learning in kindergarten all the way through adulthood, reduced and prevented substance abuse, mental illness of all kinds, behavioral issues, incarceration, even divorce rates. Why don't we have this in every school? And then I saw that there were impediments to that. And so I worked with educators, administrators, early childhood development specialists, and a whole team of people to develop a program that transcends all of those barriers. And this information is so vitally important to us. And, I just wanted to make it available to everyone, everyone in the world.
I want to break a few things down in so because you bring up so much incredible information, and the impact of social emotional learning and what it can mean to our schools, to our society is immense. On the performance side of things, when we don't know how to process the emotions and experiences that we're going through, that will take up a lot of our focus. We literally can't focus on the moment if we're stuck in our heads and our bodies processing through things that we don't understand. When we learn that, and then we can actually refocus on what's back in front of us again, that's going to have at just the results level an impact on the performance that we have. But the other point that you bring in terms of many points that you bring in terms of the reduction that it creates in a lot of the harms or the ills of not doing this, depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, anger and rage type of issues that do come up. Homicidal tendencies. There was a stat that I heard recently, and I share this with everybody to understand the immense importance of this. Since 2011, so over the last 7 to 7.5 years, the suicide rate among young boys has climbed 25%, and among girls, 75%. That's not acceptable as a society for us to put up with. We need to be able to take a look at what is really going on. And a lot of that roots itself in depression and anxiety, which can be counteracted through learning social and emotional skills. It is a very important societal impact, and it affects those that are suffering right now, let alone what this will do as a ripple effect on what happens after school, because we don't just leave the issues when we graduate. We bring them with us, as we well know. And so let me ask one more question on this, and then I want to break down actually the formula of how we choose love. How is it that what you learned and what you went through, because I know one of those virtues that is part of this process is forgiveness. And I'm curious how all of this played into your own path of actually being able to forgive, which opened up the ability to choose love. And I'm just curious what that looked like and what that felt like and what that part of your journey was like.
That's a great question, because forgiveness is one of the most important parts of my journey. And, from the beginning, however, I did have, believe it or not, compassion for Adam Lanza. I knew somebody that could do something so heinous must have been in a tremendous amount of pain. And I think that it started with seeing Jesse's message of nurturing, healing love, understanding that if Adam Lanza was able to give and receive nurturing, healing love, the tragedy would never have happened. And then learning things about his life, understanding the torment that he went through, the bullying that actually went on throughout his schooling, and how we knew about his issues. We knew the services that he needed specifically, and not only didn't provide those, but didn't make sure that he got them outside of school. And interestingly enough, I've been through similar circumstances. So I know the difficulty, I know the frustration. And and the other thing, I watched as people really pointed a finger at Adam Lanza. Of course, he is accountable and responsible for what happened. And they also blamed his mother for providing him with the guns. And I'm a single mom. I was trying to do everything on my own. I know how difficult it is. I know difficulties with your children and trying to make connections and doing the best that you can with the skills and the tools that you have. If you knew better, you would do better. And I certainly can look back in my life and see mistakes that I made that, by the way, would have been made, would have been prevented had I had social and emotional learning in school. But anyway, I felt compassion for them. But ultimately, knowing that there was a chance that I could also become Adam Lanza's victim for the rest of my life, allowing him to have control over my thoughts that impact my feelings, that then impact my behavior. And part of my early decision to forgive was also part of the modeling for JT. I in my reading about forgiveness, it's the only way. And this is what I found actually just through my personal experience. Sometimes the only way to take back your personal power. And I don't know any other way to get through this scenario, that, experiencing this horrific tragedy, other than to forgive so that I can move forward with my mission unimpeded, unattached to the man who murdered my son. And I think about it, as you said, almost 6 years later, and I think it would seem crazy if I allowed, because it isn't allowing, but we have to understand that it's a choice. We have to be given this awareness. If we don't have the awareness, how could we possibly know? But once we understand that forgiveness is a choice, and then it becomes a process, and the tremendous benefits, and they're all scientifically proven, by the way, that forgiveness can give us less anger, can positively impact us physically, mentally, and emotionally, and really is the only way to cut the cord that attaches us to pain. It becomes a decision that is for you, that makes your life better. It doesn't mean, and I went through all of this, learning this and learning it with my family too, and actually sometimes arguing with my family about it. It doesn't mean that you condone what they did. It doesn't mean that you forget. Clearly, I travel all around the world talking about my story. I will never forget. I don't want to forget. It doesn't mean that you can't hold the person who hurt you accountable. We're all accountable for our actions and our inactions. It simply means you are taking your personal power back. That's actually my new and improved definition. Taking your personal power back and cutting the cord that attaches you to pain. And for me, that was the only way to do that, through forgiveness. And it's not even like, I don't have to continue in this process of forgiveness, because I do. It's not that I don't fall back into anger. I'm a human being. I still cry every day. I miss Jesse. I have emotions, but I literally use this formula on a daily basis, and it's actually neuroscientifically accurate in the order, and it does work. And forgiveness is a big part of that, but it does also take a lot of courage to cut that cord that attaches you to pain and to move forward without it.
Absolutely. So I want to get into that formula, but I thank you so much for what you share on forgiveness, because it's one of those places that we, even outside of tragedy and in our normal daily lives, how much that's a place that we get stuck, and we get stuck within the blame, and we get stuck because we believe we need to hold on to certain things in certain ways. And there are ways of us moving forward without forgetting, without ignoring. We're not turning a blind eye. There are things that we still do, but it allows us to begin to move forward with that sense of agency, with that personal power that you describe, because we know that we have the ability to choose to respond how it is that we move forward from this moment on.
If you think about blame in this situation, which is really the assignment of pain and responsibility onto someone else, if you think about blaming Adam and his mom, if it really was their fault, and actually I really wish that it was, because if it was, then it would never have happened before, and it would never happen again. Yeah. But wait a minute, it's happened hundreds of times across the country since then. So in reality, it cannot be their fault. But then again, that's, we sometimes want to find something to blame so that we don't have to take responsibility for it ourselves. And what I realized is that, I had to take responsibility for what happened to my son. I think a lot of people don't realize that they're responsible for their kids' safety when they go to school. I was responsible ultimately for Jesse's safety when he went to school that day. And we're all responsible for our children's safety every single day, even if it's not your own child. It's our children, and we're responsible. And when we understand that that we are responsible, then we can be part of the solution. And by the way, I think maybe people think, oh my gosh, there's a they out there with a capital T that takes care of things like this, right? My gosh, we live in America. We pay taxes. We're a civilized society. This can't go on. But you know what? The actual truth of the matter is, it's our responsibility, and we're going to have to take it and all be part of the solution in order to fix what is going on in our society. And the Choose Love movement is a really great way to do that, because we're all connected as human beings in the want and need to love and be loved. We're all the same in that. It doesn't matter how old we are, what religion we practice, what color our skin, any perceived difference that we have. We're all the same in the want and need to love and be loved. We're all human beings in that. And so the Choose Love movement is a way. It doesn't matter what political party you're a part of. It doesn't matter what you think about guns or not, or anything else. We all have the want and need to love and be loved. And that is really addressing the cause of a lot of the issues that we're seeing. And so it can be the solution.
It does, because it brings a certain level of awareness to something that is within our control. It is something that changes the way in which we will see and we will operate within this world. And it gets very much to the core of what's going on. It's not to say there's not other factors and things like that to consider, exactly as you said, there are. But this is something we have absolute control over, bringing into our family room, let alone into our classrooms, into our PTAs, however it is that we're spreading this out. So with that, let's come to that Choose Love formula. We shared one of the elements, but let's talk it through in order, because you said there's a reason that it actually lays out the way that it does. It's extraordinary how this came about. So if you would share that formula, the virtues, as it were, of choosing love.
Sure, absolutely. So we start with courage. Because everything starts with courage. Courage is the most important of all character values, because without it, we can't really do anything well. And if you think about it, it takes courage to do so much in our life. We all have things going on, right? We all have our own pain and suffering. Really, a privilege of having lived through what I lived through is that I can connect with other people on this level of truth. And the thing is, it's really not about what happens to us, because we all have stuff going on, right? And when it's going on with us, it's the worst. It's all about us, it's all about our pain. And it's not really about what happens to us. It's about how we choose to respond to what happens to us. That's what shapes and molds us as human beings. That's where we take our personal power back, because we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can always choose how we respond. That's when we choose whether we're going to be victimized or not. And what is the bridge really between fear, which is victimization, and love, and that is choosing love in your response, which is good for you and good for the world. It's really courage. Courage is the bridge that brings you from fear to love. And we do use Jesse's example of tremendous courage, because, as a 6-year-old little boy, he stands up to a shooter that's already murdered 2 people in the hallway right outside of his door. It's not like they didn't, have an idea of what was going on. And, it's the ultimate form of courage to lay down your life for your friends. Hopefully we'll never be called to do that, but we can practice courage every day in small and big ways. Think about the little ways that it takes just to have courage when somebody comes up and they're not kind to you, to actually respond, choose how you respond with kindness. We practice courage in so many little ways, in stepping outside of our own busyness and doing something for someone else, even in forgiving in relationships, and even being grateful when things aren't going our way. So, and that's how you have the courage with the rest of the character values. But courage, we have to cultivate courage. Courage is like a muscle. We have to be aware that we have it, and then we have to practice it on a daily basis. Awareness is really, really important.
I think just the one thing that I wanted to add in there, because that's such an important part of this choosing process of where it is that we go. And you highlighted it before, that these are traits, these are ways of choosing aspects of our life that we're not necessarily, they're in us, but that's not our natural tendency. Most of the time when we're confronted with things that are a challenge, that are an affront to us in any manner, our tendency is more to the tribal side of who we are, to fight and to create conflict and everything else. And that's why this also takes so much courage, is it's actually significantly more courageous to turn away from that form of conflict and to turn away from that form of anger and be able to face the vulnerability of saying, I'm going to take responsibility for how I move forward. And I know that it might be awkward. It might be uncertain. I might be confused. I may move through all sorts of fears. But it takes extraordinary courage to turn in that direction, which is also not a natural instinct for most of us. So I really also appreciate that as that first step, because it does open us up to what's next.
You could dial that back too. I mean, You're talking about the courage in conflict, but let's dial it all the way back to our negative bias as human beings.
Yes.
Where the majority of our thoughts that we have on a daily basis are negative. 70 to 80% of our tens of thousands of thoughts are negative. And that's because that's, traditionally what has kept us safe through the millennia. But how much courage does it take to actually have a negative response, which is kind of our natural way of being, and to turn it into a positive one? Just to be mindfully aware of the thoughts that go through our head on a daily basis. And this is really how the Choose Love movement started. It was at Jesse's funeral when I stood up to speak, and I said, this whole tragedy started as an angry thought in Adam Lanza's head. And I pictured him as a little boy having an angry thought without the tools or nurturing environment to deal with that thought. We know every single thought impacts us on a cellular level. We know the power of our thoughts through epigenetics. We know that our thoughts can turn on and off gene expression and impacts us physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so I asked everyone that day, because of course everyone, it was less than a week later when Jesse had his funeral, was asking, what can we do for you? And I said, there is something that you can actually do. The whole tragedy started with a thought, because everything starts with a thought in our head. This whole podcast started with a thought in your head. Anger starts with a thought. Joy starts with a thought. Our perception of our reality is simply a thought in our head that we choose. And a thought can be changed. And so I asked everyone on that day to start thinking about what they think about and to actively change one angry thought and turn it into a loving thought. Just one thought. I said, just by doing that with one thought, you will positively impact yourself, those around you, and through the ripple effect, you will make this a safer, more peaceful and loving world. And so people started responding to that. About a week later, they went home and practiced that and honored that. And they said that one simple act completely changed their life. And I knew that I was onto something. Actually, initially, that was my idea for the Choose Love movement. And then I got educators involved, and they blew the roof off of it by creating the Choose Love enrichment program. But that was the initial thought. And, that takes courage to a lot of us go through life just simply unconscious and allowing things that we do on a daily basis to be reactions. But if we can initiate a little bit of courage, we can thoughtfully respond, and we have so much more control than we ever imagined of our lives.
So we take the courage to actually face exactly that, the fact that we do have the power to take control of our lives and to respond, and we tap into that courage. What comes next?
So then the next character value is gratitude. And gratitude is the great mind shifter. So of those 50,000 or so thoughts that go through our head, the majority of which we know are negative, they go through our head single file. You cannot have two thoughts at once. And that means that you can't have an angry, lower energy thought and a grateful thought at once. But of course, it doesn't mean you can't have an angry thought, a grateful thought, and then an angry thought. But that's where a good gratitude practice comes in. And that's part, of course, of what we're teaching the kids. But gratitude is so vitally important. We have to remember that it's not happiness that makes us grateful, but gratitude that makes us happy. And it's so incredibly powerful. But of course, it takes courage to be grateful when things aren't going our way. But that's when we can really use it. And when you look at the scientific benefits of practicing gratitude in your life, it's mind-blowing how many there are. My three favorite are better sleep, increased increased strengthening of the immune system, and elongating your life, just to name a few. There are so many scientifically proven benefits of just practicing gratitude. It's just so incredibly powerful, and it's not difficult. You just write down 3 things you're grateful for before you go to bed. And that even kind of shifts your mind into a more positive place. And we know that, we just know that gratitude is so powerful. And can you imagine a generation that grows up understanding how important gratitude is? I've been in schools that are 100% free and reduced lunch. And I've met kids that just the things that go on in their life are unspeakable. And they are sitting there in elementary school, writing gratitude lists and focusing on what they have, because there's always something to be grateful for. And so instead of, acting out and being belligerent, and nobody would blame these kids for being that way, they're focusing on what they have, and they're going to be okay.
Incredible. So we have the courage, which allows us to start to tap into that sense of agency and that personal power that we have. We start to have that courage to turn what might be the negative thinking and embrace it instead with gratitude and appreciation. That gratitude and appreciation starts to open up a space within ourselves. And that's where forgiveness enters, which is what you spoke about before. As that forgiveness enters in, I know then that last piece is compassion in action. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that last piece as well. If there's anything more to add to forgiveness, by all means. But with compassion in action, what does that really start to look like and bring out within us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and forgiveness, you have to remember, is also for ourselves,
yes,
as well as for others. And then that actually neuroscientifically strengthens us to have the courage to step outside of our own pain and suffering, and not just the pain and suffering, but also the busyness that we all have. We're all so distracted. We have so much going on, more than ever before, our hedonistic treadmill and all this that's going on in our life, stepping outside of that and helping others. And compassion actually has 2 components. The first component is the identification of a need in someone else. Sometimes people call that empathy, but empathy lights up the same receptors in our brain as physical pain. So when you feel somebody else's pain, you actually do. And the way to move through that is through the action component. That's why we call it compassion in action, because it's actually the action component of compassion, where science tells us, and I say all of the nurturing, healing love that we give, we get back. And I really have to tell you that probably the most important lesson that I've learned over the past 5.5 years, because remember, I wasn't a bad person before, but I wasn't this person. I wasn't a person that's been shaped and molded as I have through my journey and all of my research, and also spending my life now in service. And that has been one of the most wonderful lessons, but also gifts that I have learned through this whole journey, this whole adventure. And that is the tremendous healing power of doing for others. Because every time we do something for someone else, and this isn't why we do it, but you get so much nurturing, healing love back. And really, this is how I continue. People say, oh my gosh, your schedule is so booked, and aren't you just, I'll give a 2-hour talk, and they'll say, oh my gosh, you're going through, your story. Doesn't it just physically and mentally exhaust you? And I'll say, no, oh my gosh, it fills me up with energy. I feel so good. It's like I'm riding on a high for the next day, because I'm literally giving so much love and then getting it in return, and connecting on such a deeper level, connecting on a heart level with other people. It's really the most beautiful gift that I've been given. And the thing is, I know I wouldn't have gotten here without my son's murder, and I would give all of it back for one more second with him. but that won't happen. So I can just sit in gratitude for what I've learned and the gift that I believe that the Choose Love movement is giving to kids and the world through this formula for choosing love.
It really is amazing that with courage, gratitude, forgiveness, compassion, when we initially come to some of these things, we may feel that this is we're doing it for others, and there's something noble in that. And at the same time, it's to not forget how much this does for us all at the same time. And then we are connecting to ourselves and to each other in a very different way than how things may look out there right now. And you think about where this takes us and the way that it prepares our children and the way that it will prepare our society, then we can start to get into other issues and work on other elements of who we are and where we are to continue to improve this world. There were just two things that I wanted to ask you about before we wrap up today. One is we didn't specifically say, so for those that want to spread kind of what you're doing in the specific Choose Love program, what do they need to know about this? Because it's really accessible to them. You did away with one of the major boundaries to this.
It is. They can go on our website, jessielewischooselove.org. And then all the way over to the right, there's a support tab. And the first choice underneath that is our ambassador program. So we have training you can go through. We have sample letters that you can send to your schools. If I knew about social and emotional learning earlier, and I understood that it was the number one way to keep our kids safe. And when I say that, people kind of look at me and they say, but wait a minute, what about door locks, active shooter protocols, bulletproof film, arming or not arming school resource officers, single point entries? I say, right, that's all very important. Unfortunately, those are all external safety measures, but none of that addresses the cause of why a child would want to come in and harm themselves or others. What does that is social emotional learning, which cultivates safety from the inside out. It's the number one way to improve a school's culture and climate. And we know those things are directly related to incidences. So I think that when parents understand that it's their responsibility for their kids and the kids' safety in school, I think that the Choose Love movement is a great resource for them to go in, to check out what we have in the ambassador program. It kind of walks you through how you can introduce it to your schools. We are coming out in a month with a parent program as well. It's a free video-based series that kind of bridges what kids are learning in school to their home life. And then we're also coming out with a community piece as well, because I have businesses and chambers of commerce and presidents of banks and chief of police saying, we all need this message and we all want to be a part of the solution. So we are moving forward, and I just feel so blessed to be a part of this. So for everyone, it's really, really easy to start introducing this, the work and specifically the programming that's connected to the schools. It's free curriculum right now. Okay, guys, this is something really, really important. A lot of the boundaries have been cut on this. And I will say, because I also know some of them happen to listen to this, contact the PTA. If you know the head of the PTA, if you know a lot of the board members that are there, some of the school board members, write letters to them, introduce this to that stuff. I've got somebody who's probably listening to this right now who knows they're the head of the PTA and knows they're about to get a letter from me on this. And so we know everybody inside of our communities. We know the people that are involved. Please reach out and introduce them to this work. The last thing that I wanted to ask you about that was yet another major development of what's been going on is a partnership that you were entering into with Kaiser Permanente. And I was hoping you could share a little bit about that. Sure, absolutely. I just wanted to say one more thing about the previous subject, and that is that I think we're all feeling a little bit of anxiety about what's going on with our kids in school and also in our society. Yes. And the opposite of anxiety is action. And so this is a way for you to do something to reduce your anxiety, and something that is really powerful. So I just wanted to say that. And I'm really, really excited to partner with Kaiser Permanente and actually Her Smile, #HerSmile out in California. And they are going to help us spread the message into schools and hopefully eventually across the country. We're we're looking for partners that will help us spread the message. I mean, we have this incredible program, but we all have to be part of the solution, right? We need other people to get involved. We need partners. We need individuals coming on as ambassadors, taking this into their hometowns. You know, I'll give you an amazing example of a powerful ambassador. There was a woman in New Hampshire that knew that she wanted this in her son's school. She's a single mom as well. And she brought the message to her principal. And then she noticed that her governor's wife had made a comment about social emotional learning. She reached out through Facebook, I think, to her and said, "Hey, you should check out my friend's program." And she did. And eventually, New Hampshire is actually the first state to release their statewide school safety initiative. And they focused, after speaking with us considerably, and I spoke with the director of Homeland Security as well, who actually wrote the report, and they agreed that having this proactive preventative piece, in addition to those external safety measures, but also having this proactive preventative piece for not only school violence, by the way, but also for substance abuse, mental illness, and all the other things that our kids face, was really important. And they used our program as the backbone of support for their entire state. And they actually hired my ambassador as a full-time person. So just with the sole purpose of spreading this Choose Love program into schools. So there's, huge opportunity out there to be part of the solution. I can tell you that it feels really good. It's very empowering when you know that you've done something. It definitely reduces anxiety, and we need help.
Yeah. Scarlett, so one of the things for everybody that's listening, I know that we normally wrap up with kind of how do we keep the conversation continuing? Well, this is it. Okay. This is what we've been chatting about. This is how you move it forward in conversation and in action, so that this is something that you can take action on. This is something you can do based off of this conversation. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in for that. Scarlett, I want to thank you for sharing your son with us and letting him inspire us, and for the work that you are doing in the world and the difference that it is making, and the profound difference it will continue to make.
Thank you so much, Luke. And thank you for helping spread the message.
Absolutely. For everyone, I would just leave you to center in on those three words of nurturing, healing, love. We practice that through courage and through gratitude and forgiveness and putting our compassion into action. And I know that when we do these types of things, we connect to ourselves so much more deeply. We connect to others so much more sweetly. And if we want to live more fully, more deeply, and more consciously, this is a beautiful way to do it. And thank you very much. As always, thanks for tuning in, and continue to enjoy the journey.
Hey, as this episode is wrapping up, you may be asking yourself, what's next? Well, what's next? I hope that you've been joining in on the monthly live cast that we do for the One Idea Away community. You see, every single month, we gather some incredible guests that are talking about the types of transitions that they've made or are even in the midst of making to create a happier life, to create a life that's more aligned to who they truly are. So we're talking about happiness and purpose. We're talking about community. We're talking about how do we have that modern day success, meaning how do we succeed in our happiness, our well-being, our quality of life, while also making a great living, making the difference in the contributions that we are each meant to make. So when you get involved in the monthly live cast, you can ask some questions of our guests. You can participate with some of the other community members and the ongoing chat that just seems to explode as we get into these deeper conversations throughout the whole hour that we do this. So the only way, though, that you can get these special episodes is when you register for them. It is free, but you got to register to get involved and continue the conversation as we're always talking about. So just hop on over to oneideaaway.com/livecast. And oneideaaway.com/livecast. Join us there, get involved in the conversation, get involved in the community. I can't wait to continue the conversation with you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post, or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.